Welcome to the Don Podcast, a Minnesota music conversation, recorded at CCX Studio, produced by Javi, and engineered by Jimmy Morris. And now, here's your host.
We're joined on this episode by Barry Haugen, who worked for many years as repairing guitars at New Capay. Roughly, what years were you there kind of working?
Well, that's quite an introduction, Don. Do you think that's true? I mean, I heard that rumor too. Yeah, it goes back a long time in my years, I guess. I went back to November of 1984, and I got out of there in November of 1992.
Well, that was a pretty exciting time in Minnesota music. So you must have really met a lot of people there. You know, a lot of musicians.
Well, I did. I mean, if looking back in history, I wish I could have been there maybe 5 years before the fact, but New Capay Music was one of the preeminent guitar shops in the Twin Cities area for many, many years. And I remember when I was first really interested in guitars, reading Guitar Player magazine and seeing a lot of their work, their custom guitars being in the pages of Guitar Player magazine.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, that's a really cool place. And I had gone up there a number of times as a customer, but it wasn't until I was going to a program for guitar repair, musical instrument repair in Red Wing, that I really thought, you know, I really want to do this for a career, and I want to see maybe if I can work at New Capay Music.
Right. So what made you decide to go to the guitar school? I mean, to the repair school? I mean, was it just, you must have been interested in
there's a little bit of family conflict there, because I had gone of 4.5 years of college and studying both history and business administration. And my dad thought, oh, you're going to be a top-notch CPA kind of guy. And that didn't really work out that well. And I had moved home. I had been going to school out in Tacoma, Washington. And I got home with really nothing to do. And my mom suggested, there's a really interesting stringed instrument repair repair program in Red Wing, Minnesota. You should check that out. And I can see my dad in the background rolling his eyes like, what the fuck are you think you're doing, you dude? Go out and make some money. So anyway, it took me a while to get hooked up to that program. They were booked for that year, so I ended up taking an electronic repair program. And the following year, I did the stringed instrument repair program. And that was in 1982 and 83. And when I got out of there, I got a job right away at a guitar place, a guitar repair shop in Atlanta, Georgia, called Atlanta Guitar Works. And that worked out really great until the two owners of that company got into a little bit of an argument, and they shut down the telephones. So all the work dried up. And so I eventually moved back to Minnesota, where I spent about 3/4 of a year at a little music store in Stillwater repairing guitars and violins. I think in November, I got a phone call from New Capay Music asking me if I could help them out, because they were swamped. So that's what started it out.
And so when you were down in Atlanta, was there a lively scene down there? And did you get to meet some people down there? Was there much going on?
Yeah, I met a lot of people. I did a lot of great guitar repair work, and there was a lot of good live music down there. One of the repair guys there, his name is Chris Adarig. He recently passed away, I believe, from esophageal cancer or something terrible like that. He was a top-notch Les Paul guy. He manufactured, or he replicated Les Pauls, and he did amazing work. The Southeast is it's totally different from Nashville scene or the New York scene or the LA scene, or if you even want to compare it to the Minneapolis scene. Just when you think about Southern rock and roll and Dickie Betts and the Allman Brothers, guys like that would come into the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And but then at the same time in the college radio stations, you had bands like REM.
Right, yeah.
And one of my first big clients was a bass player from REM, and later Peter Buck from REM brought in a Rickenbacker 6-string guitar, and he said, I want this converted to a 12-string. I don't know how I did it, but if you look at a classical guitar, and the headstock has got the two sides of the headstock that are open, that takes the tuning pegs from the edge of the headstock instead of coming underneath like a typical guitar. I thought, well, let's try that. And it worked out awesome. It worked out great, but don't ask me to do that tonight.
And then, so you say it's a different kind of a scene down there. So is guitars different from place? I mean, there's different guitars. There's Les Pauls. There's I don't know much about guitars.
It's not
so
so much the guitars.
It's the sound though, right? And so is there different sounds from different repairs? Can you repair things to sound differently or not so much? Does a guitar just sound like a guitar?
Well, a guitar is like a voice, a singer's voice. Stratocasters compared to Telecasters, compared to Gibsons, compared to Rickenbackers, they all have their unique voice, and it's a lot to do with the manufacturing. It also has a lot to do with the wood that's involved.
So do you have to repair them differently depending on what it is, or is all guitars kind of repaired under one standard format?
Well,
I suppose it depends on what the repair is, but I mean,
exactly.
when you're doing just like a tune-up or a fret thing.
Well, a tune-up is a tune-up.
Basic?
I mean, on an electric guitar, on modern electric guitars, each string has their individual saddle. It can be raised and lowered, and it could be moved backward and forward. And that's important because a guitar is an instrument that needs to have each string tuned specifically to the string.
Okay.
Therefore, the ability to move that saddle piece either forward or backward. If you play the harmonic at the 12th fret and then compare the fretted note, those two notes have to be the same. If they're not, the guitar will not play in tune.
Okay.
So for studio musicians, a lot of times they'd come in often to move that string or set of strings forward or backward, because wood is a natural
element, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a sponge. It can either absorb or contract based on the climate.
Yeah.
So Minnesota, it's either cold and dry or hot and humid. And that's going to affect the playability of that guitar.
Okay.
So a lot of what I would do at either New Capay or Atlanta Guitar Works is to educate people on your guitar is going to do this in the summertime and it's going to do the opposite. And so you need to stay on top of that.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you too, with musicians, it seems like I was listening to a podcast with Night Bob on it. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a famous engineer, and he said he knew a little bit about fixing guitars and stuff, and so he was always on tour, and he would say that these guys, their guitars, they'd say they didn't work, and then he would end up just turning a screw a little bit or just adjusting this a little bit, and he said it would make a total difference. And then the guy thought he was a hero because he was doing it. He says, I'm no guitar repairman, but I knew enough. And that's kind of what you're talking about.
Exactly.
There's education behind not just playing a guitar, but how a guitar actually works.
Well, touring musicians today are not like they were back in the 80s. They're much more sophisticated. They have road techs. They're traveling with dozens of guitars. There might be 2 or 3 guitar techs per tour, one for a bass player, one for each guitar player, and they have to take care of the guitars and make sure they play accordingly. I remember back in the 80s sometime, Lenny Kravitz came to town, First Avenue, to play a show, and apparently the guitar didn't, it played like shit. So I get a phone call, and I go down to First Avenue, and I grab the guitar, and it was way, way out of tune. And I brought it back to Lenny, and I said, I don't know if you know this, but he had a guitar tech that he could put on a set of strings, and he could tune it, but he had no clue about intonation.
Okay.
And so I told Lenny, this is what you got to do a couple times a year. And it was great. The show was great too.
but there is a lot of education. How often are you educating how often were you educating somebody about how their guitar actually works and the workings of a guitar? And then do you think many of them caught on, or you think they just said, okay, fine, next time it's out of tune, I'll bring it back to you and you can just do it again and I don't have to worry about it?
I have a kind of funny story. It's about a previous guest of yours, Terry Isaacson.
Okay.
A bunch of years ago, I was asked to help set up guitars at one of the Lennon shows. And I finally met Terry, and I set up his guitar, and he got my phone number, and I had done a bunch of work for him, and I kind of instructed him on, this is how you set up your guitar, this is how you do intonation, and I haven't seen Terry since.
And I was going to kind of ask you that. I was in the construction business, and we were always told, when you're going out to someone's house and doing something, and the guy's looking over your shoulder and asking you questions, don't answer him, because the next time you ain't going to come back out again, because he's going to end up doing it himself. Did you ever feel that way, or did you feel you were kind of part of the community where you had to kind of help these guys out, and that you had plenty of work, and or were you a little scared of teaching these guys?
No, some people can work a wrench and a screwdriver, and some people can't. When I go to the gas station, I know how to put gas in my car, and that's about it. Anything else, I'm taking it to the dealer.
All right. And then tools, the tools of the trade. Let's talk a little bit about some of the tools. Is there special? There's got to be specialty tools, and are they expensive? And is there a lot of them, or is it just standard screwdrivers, pliers?
Oh no,
a big hammer.
Big hammer, BFH, right? Well, there's specific clamps that are made out of wood. They're called camp clamps. They're padded with a cork. So when you're working on an acoustic guitar, you're not going to mess up the finish.
Okay.
Right? So if you got to glue a separated top from the rib, you can squeeze it back until the glue sets up, right? And there's sound hole clamps where if you need to re-glue the bridge on an acoustic guitar, that will go in and clamp down. There's some specialty tools. One of the biggest tools that I brought with me to all my repair locations was it's like a table that the guitar would set in that would simulate string tension.
Okay.
And after the guitar would be locked into that, I could take the strings off, remove the frets, redress the fretboard, put in a new set of frets, and it would play amazing. That's another thing. Wood, when it moves around, has a mind of its own. It might twist to the right or the left. It might hump up. A tool like that, I can isolate the high and low spots and take care of those problems, put in a new set of frets, and the owners are amazed.
Yeah.
It's just amazing results.
And then you said, you talked about the guy down in Atlanta that you met or that you worked with.
Yeah. Chris.
Yeah. Is there, like in the city here, is there a lot of repair guys, or is it a small community?
You know, I think it's gotten pretty big because that trade school in Red Wing is pretty popular, and people come from all over the country to do that. When I was doing it, there weren't a lot of people doing it professionally, and the people that were doing it probably learned basic woodworking skills as they would apply to guitars, and there wasn't a lot of knowledge back in the 70s and 80s. There is now. And some of the, you know, also now is that you have computer technology. You have luthiers that are using CNC computer technology to build their guitars. And you didn't have that back in the 80s.
Right. And I suppose with so many people taking people on tour with them, the shop guitar guy is kind of not as busy. You know, when someone comes to town or there's a tour going on, they have a guy. They didn't used to have a guy go with them that knew how to repair the guitar and fix the guitar. They just stopped in every city.
Well, you know, you've got...
So that adds a lot to
you've got your basic putting a set of strings on, tuning it up, probably checking the action and the intonation. Most guitar techs in the 80s should have known that. As time went on and tours got more and more sophisticated, some of these guitar techs really knew their stuff.
Right.
I remember when Steve Vai was playing guitar with David Lee Roth, they came to the Met Center, and I was called out to the Met Center to do some fret work for Steve Vai. The guitar tech that met me was standing in front of a road case. It was probably 5 or 6 feet tall by 2 foot deep and 5 feet wide, with 2 doors with drawers and drawers of Floyd Rose guitar bridges and pickups and I thought, oh, this is a wave of the future. You know, I'm kind of I think I was around at the time where that type of thing wasn't existing at all.
You saw the future before it kind of came a little bit.
It was kind of the future because now, like I said, most guitar techs going on road with tours are really educated, and they know how to do more than putting on a set of strings.
Did you ever get an offer to go on the road with somebody, or is that something that you didn't want to do?
No, I never did, and there was Jim Boquist a long time ago he was working a lot with a Westerberg, and was suggesting that maybe I could do some road work for him, and I said I don't think that's my my thing.
You got to kind of be a different kind of guy to go on those tours and stuff. You know, a lot of people say they like to, you know, be a roadie or they'd like to do this, but it's pretty tough work, and it's pretty hard.
A guitar tech and a guitar repairman are two different things.
Okay. Well, what's the difference? Let's hear the difference.
Well, you got to have a shop full of tools to glue a broken neck or put on a set of frets. You can't necessarily do that on the road.
Okay.
So
they just do like minor work. It's a lot of minor work a tech does, whereas a repair does a lot of more major stuff. So is that what, when you were in the shop and stuff, were you doing more major work than you were kind of the
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's a specialty in it.
A lot of fret work, a lot of broken headstocks, both on acoustic and electric guitars. There's all different types of repairs.
And how much is there a difference between like electric guitar and acoustic guitar, and then like someone playing jazz and someone playing rock, or someone playing singer-songwriter? I mean, is there a huge setup difference, or is it just
there actually is. A lot of players are very individual, and they like their strings set a specific height. Right? So some like it real high, some like it really low. I'll give you a good example. Jelly Bean Johnson from The Time. Everybody thinks of him as a great drummer, and he is. But he's an exceptional guitar player.
Okay.
And he would come in, and he would want his string action as low as you could go. And I kept going lower and lower, and he'd say, "Lower, Barry." And so, yeah.
And what does that do? How does that change the sound of the guitar? Or is it just the finger action?
It's the finger action,
Okay.
how easy it is to play the guitar.
So is lower easier than higher? Or?
For a lot of people it is.
Oh, okay. So it's real individual.
It's very individual.
So you've got to know that when you're working on someone's guitar, you really have to know that individual.
You have to ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
Like Jim May, a lot of people know Jim May that's probably listening to this program, used to be the manager at Newt Capet, but he's been in a lot of bands locally.
Mm-hmm.
He likes really light gauge strings and really low action.
Okay.
And other players like real tall action.
Mm-hmm. And
it depends on how they pluck and attack the string.
Okay.
The more aggressively you attack that string, it's going to vibrate more. And with that vibration, you get potentially a lot of trouble. Now, if you're not attacking it and you're letting the amplifier do the work, you can get away with really low action.
Okay. So, between like a jazz guy and a hard rock guy, there's both on both sides. I mean, there can be a jazz guy that's you think of a jazz guy as being more technical and more that they would want a more a sound, a specific sound, than a rock guy that's just kind of
I guess
fashion away. But what you're
you're
saying,
making a lot of generalizations,
Right.
because you
I
look
am.
at somebody like Al Di Meola that plays that real staccato type of jazz fusion rock and compare that to somebody like Jimmy Hall,
Mhm.
who plays a more traditional archtop acoustic guitar, jazz guitar, are two different things.
Right, but the guitar itself is basically the same. I mean, the guitar itself, the setup, not the same. But I mean, if they both of them brought it in, you could fix them both basically the same, just knowing.
You tell
their
me what you
style.
want, I'll do it for you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because.
And then I would always,
and I do make those generalizations because I don't know that much about guitar and sound and stuff. And so to the average fan like me, a guitar, you think of a jazz guy, Al Di Meola, as being totally different than someone like Jimmy Page, that they would have totally different guitars and want different things. But what you're saying is, it's just the individual guy. You got Jimmy Pages in the jazz, and you got Al Di Meolas in the rock world.
Right.
They have their stuff. Mm-hmm. Interesting. We're going to go into a song by Reynold Philipsi.
Oh, Jesus.
I really tried. Reynold, I'm really sorry.
Okay.
I'm
let
terrible
me,
with names.
Can I do the introduction,
Yeah,
Don?
go ahead.
All right. There's a couple of guys that I knew from Newt Capet Music. Awesome guitar players, awesome songwriters. Reynold Philipsi was the lesson director at Newt Capet for years and years. He later went on to do lessons at Willie's American Guitars.
Okay.
He teamed up with Scott Yoho, which was a sales guy at Newt Capet, another awesome songwriter who had a band called Auto Body Experience. This is a collaboration, songwriting collaboration on them. I honestly think that most of the guitar work on the tune was done by Reynold, but Reynold and Scott, great guys, great guitar players.
Before we go into the song, what was the setup for Reynold? Can you talk about his? Can you say what he wanted, or is that something?
You're asking me to remember that, Don?
Okay, you're not going to remember.
Well, the thing with Reynold, he played both electric guitar, and he also kind of masters the Django Reinhardt style,
Okay.
which is a little higher action, and the strings are higher and plucked heavier. So it depends on his style.
Okay, it depends on what he's playing and what he's doing at that time.
Yeah.
All right, so this is Finster Carlson and the 515, and it's by Reynold
Philipsi
Thank
and
you.
Scott Yoho.
All right.
Fences in the basement playing with the stars. Louise is cooking upstairs, making lots of noise. She thinks old man's crazy, playing with his train. His useless little hobbies, time pissed down the drain. Fence to Carson in the 515. Fence to Carson in the 515. She bakes 10 dozen cookies and fusses with a mess. Creates a tiny station scene, that's what he does the best. The moon shines in the window block, his basement world is real. She calls him down, it's getting late, he hollers back, big deal. Fence to Carson in the 515. Fence to Carson in the 515. In his finished basement, fences the engineer. He makes them make the mountains and the buildings he holds dear. He likes the older trains the best, the ones that ran on coal. He drops some pellets down the stack and smoke comes out the hole. Fence to Carson in the 515. 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 Some days slightly with brushes, he moves away from facts. He makes a model of Louise and ties her to the tracks. The train will make the tunnel, now Louise is in the way. She asks about the crashing noise, he won't know what to say. Fence to Carson in the 515. Fence to Carson in the 515. Puts the ginger cookies in 2 neat little rows. He drops the sprout steam engine and blackens several toes. She shakes her head and wonders, he's such a silly man. He downs a 7th 12 ounce and stumbles to the can. Fence to Carson in the 515. 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 Fence to Carson in the 515.
That was Reynold. Go ahead.
Reynold Filipczyk and Scott Yoho. If anybody wants to know, that's off Reynolds' album, The Peter Pan Principle. That was published in 1989.
Yeah, and we're here with Barry Haugen, who repaired a lot of guitars for these guys, and you talked about him and Scott Yoho and the auto body experience, and so fixing these guys' guitars and knowing how they play and their sound and everything, you must have really had to go out and see a lot of the bands, see them actually play to get an idea of what they were like, or does that not come into the repairs?
Doing guitar repair work wasn't just doing guitar repair work.
Right.
It was going out and hanging out with these guys and having fun and watching them play in their bands.
Right.
So it was entertainment too.
Yeah.
I can't think of another time in my life that I didn't have more fun, really.
And but it's also part of the job, right? I mean, if you're not doing that, you're really not putting your all into the job to not know these people like
exactly. And you just have to ask a lot of questions. I mean, every time I would do a repair, I would make the musician, the guitar player, sit down, play the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Does it play okay? Do you need adjustments before they would leave?
Mm-hmm. And to hear them out and play, and I mean, how often were you going out and seeing people? Were you seeing pretty much everybody play? I mean, even not only the people who were your clients and that brought their guitars.
Well, there
in,
are
but
so
other
many
people?
different great musicians and guitar players that working at Nootkapeg. You'd go out and see everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It was
just part of the job, then, huh? Yeah.
I wouldn't call it part of the job. It was just part of. It was part of the lifestyle.
Okay. Yeah.
The job part was almost second nature. It was like getting to hang out with these guys was a lot of fun.
Like the big benefit, huh?